On the 5th of October, 2021, roughly 1,400 members of the Bakery, Confectionery, Tobacco Workers, and Grain Millers International Union walked off the job at Kellogg's 4 American cereal plants in Battle Creek, Lancaster, Memphis, and Omaha. The dispute was about a 2-tier wage system. Newer workers had been hired onto lower pay and thinner benefits than the people standing next to them on the same line, doing the same work. By the union's accounting, something close to a third of the workforce sat on the lower tier. The company wanted room to expand it. The workers wanted it gone. The strike ran through October and into November. In late November, with negotiations broken down, Kellogg's CEO Steve Cahillane announced the company would begin hiring permanent replacements, not temporary staff to keep the lines moving, which the company had already been using. Permanent ones. The people on the picket line were told, in effect, that their jobs could be given away and that the company was prepared to do it. They stayed out anyway, through Thanksgiving and into December. The National Labor Relations Board was monitoring the situation, as it does when a company announces permanent replacements during an active strike. The replacements were never hired. A contract was reached. The 2-tier structure was addressed. The workers went back to their lines. 2 years and 9 months later, on the 6th of August, 2024, the company announced that the Omaha plant would close. The announcement did not use that word first. It described a supply chain modernization. W.K. Kellogg Company said it would invest somewhere between $450 million and $500 million in its manufacturing network, including up to $390 million in new equipment and infrastructure, and would take a one-time charge of about $110 million in restructuring costs. Production would increase at Battle Creek, at Lancaster, and at Belleville, Ontario. Production at Memphis would be scaled back. Omaha would close entirely, with a phased reduction beginning in late 2025, and full closure expected toward the end of 2026. The net effect, the company said, would be the loss of 550 jobs. That figure was net. It counted the hiring that would happen at the plants receiving the work. Omaha's mayor, Jean Stothert, said she learned about the closure the morning it was announced. Her statement noted that after more than 75 years in the city, Kellogg's would leave a large void. She also said she was disappointed the company had made an announcement of that size in that way. Among the people who spoke to reporters outside the plant that day was Dan Osborne, who had led the local BCTGM chapter through the strike 3 years earlier. He had worked at Kellogg's for close to 20 years. He had since left the company to run as an independent candidate in the 2024 Nebraska Senate race. The plant itself sat on F Street, in the southwest part of Omaha. Sources disagree about exactly how old it was. Some accounts put its opening in the 1940s. A local station described it as having operated for more than 60 years. The mayor's own figure, more than 75, is the one with a name attached to it, so it's the one worth using. What isn't in dispute is that generations of Omaha families had worked there, and that the building had outlasted every economic downturn, corporate restructuring, and shift in American eating habits that had happened around it. Then it didn't. The formal machinery moved slowly, which is what makes this particular closure different from most of the ones in the news this year. On the 22nd of May, 2026, W.K. Kellogg filed a worker adjustment and retraining notification with the Nebraska Department of Labor. The filing put firm dates on something that had been announced almost 2 years before. 451 positions would be eliminated. About 100 would go in the first phase. The remaining 350 or so would go in a second phase running through the 18th of August. The filing included a list of the job titles being cut, which is the part of a WARN notice that tends to get skipped. The largest single category was packing machine operator at 60 roles. Below that were 50 transitional employees, 28 process operators, 27 general mechanics, and 27 tractor operator checkers. Then 22 people in packing room labor and supply, and 20 in process labor. The list continued down through sanitation workers, supervisors, warehouse staff, plant operations managers, engineers, and the finance, human resources, labor relations, quality and food safety people who had run the building's paperwork. That last stretch of the list is the part that describes a plant rather than a payroll. A cereal factory is not 451 interchangeable people. It's 60 machine operators who know which machine runs hot, and 27 mechanics who know which of those machines the operators are wrong about, and a food safety officer who has been signing off on the same line for a decade. That knowledge does not transfer in a worn filing. It just stops. The final day of operations was Monday, the 17th of August, 2026. The last remaining employees were laid off the following day. A company spokesperson, Stacy Flathow, said production had ended, the site was entering decommissioning, and the building would be listed for sale. That is the Omaha half of the story, and on its own, it is a fairly ordinary one. 451 jobs in a metropolitan area of roughly 1 million people is not the death of a city. Omaha will absorb it. The people won't, necessarily, but the city will. The reason this closure is worth more than a local news segment is what happened to the company in between the announcement and the execution. To follow it, you have to go back to the 2nd of October, 2023, when the Kellogg Company split itself in half. It had been a single business since the 1890s, built on a cereal that W.K. Kellogg had put into production in 1894. After the split, the North American cereal business became W.K. Kellogg Company, headquartered in Battle Creek, Michigan. The global snacking business, which held Pringles and Cheez-It and most of the growth, became Kellanova, headquartered in Chicago. The split was framed as focus. In practice, one of the two companies got the brands that were growing, and one of them got the cereal aisle. W.K. Kellogg's first full fiscal year as a standalone business, 2024, produced net sales of $2.71 billion. That was down 2%. In the first half of 2025, sales fell 7.5% to $1.28 billion. By the time it went looking for a buyer, it was carrying something in the region of $500 million in debt. American breakfast had changed underneath it. Shoppers had moved toward protein and away from sugar. Parents had started reading the panel on the side of the box, and federal nutrition guidance had started pointing them in the same direction. The cereal aisle was still enormous. It just wasn't growing, and a company that consists entirely of the cereal aisle has nowhere to move. On the 10th of July, 2025, the Ferrero Group announced it would acquire W.K. Kellogg Company for $23 a share in cash, valuing the business at about $3.1 billion. That price represented a premium of roughly 40% over the average trading price of the preceding 30 days. On the 19th of September, shareholders approved it, with about 93% voting in favor. On the 26th of September, 2025, the transaction closed. W.K. Kellogg Company ceased trading and was removed from the New York Stock Exchange. Ferrero is a family business from Alba in Piedmont, Italy, founded in 1946. Most people know it for Nutella and Ferrero Rocher and Kinder. But by the time it bought Kellogg's, Ferrero had spent years assembling an American portfolio that included Butterfinger and Keebler and Famous Amos, plus Jelly Belly and Nerds and Trolli on the confectionery side, and Blue Bunny and Bomb Pop and Halo Top in the freezer aisle. That is a longer list than most people would guess, and it explains why a family-owned chocolate company from northern Italy was a plausible buyer for American breakfast cereal in the first place. Across the group, there are more than 61,000 employees. Ferrero said Battle Creek would remain its North American headquarters for cereal. It has, so far, kept that commitment. But something ended in Battle Creek on the 26th of September, 2025, that has nothing to do with headquarters or job counts. Battle Creek is a company town in the way that Newton, Iowa was a company town, or North Canton, Ohio. The city calls itself Cereal City. The Kellogg name is on the corporate offices and on a credit union and on the local community college, and on the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a major philanthropic institution that has been embedded in the city's civic life for nearly a century. For more than a century, the company that carried that name was headquartered there and owned by shareholders who could, in principle, be argued with in public. Now the name is a brand held by a privately owned Italian group. The company is a wholly owned subsidiary. There is no stock to hold, no shareholder meeting to attend, no quarterly call on which a Battle Creek reporter can ask a question. Ferrero may well be a better steward than the public markets were. The family has run its business for 80 years and tends to hold what it buys. That isn't the point. The point is that Battle Creek's relationship to the company changed from ownership to tenancy, and it did so in a transaction that most people in the city read about in the newspaper. The same thing happened to the other half. Kellanova, the snacking company, agreed in August of 2024 to be acquired by Mars for $35.9 billion. Within about 2 years of splitting itself in two to become more focused, the Kellogg Company had ceased to exist in any independent form. Both halves were absorbed into larger, privately held food groups. Which brings the two threads together. The decision to close Omaha was made on the 6th of August, 2024, by W.K. Kellogg Company, an American public company headquartered in Battle Creek, Michigan, accountable to public shareholders. 13 months later, that company sold itself. The plant closed on the 17th of August, 2026, under Ferrero's ownership. It matters to say this plainly, because the convenient version of the story is that an Italian confectionery giant bought an American institution and shut down a Nebraska factory. That version is false. Ferrero inherited the closure. The decision predated the acquisition by more than a year, and the money that made it possible had already been committed. What Ferrero did was carry out a plan it had bought along with the brands. The people in Omaha had roughly 740 days between the announcement and the last shift. In that window, the company that had condemned their plant stopped existing as an independent business, and a new owner arrived who had not made the decision and had no particular reason to reverse it. There was nobody left to appeal to. The board that made the call had been paid $23 a share and dispersed, and the equipment went to Battle Creek. Some of it went to Lancaster, and some to Belleville in Ontario. But a share of what Omaha lost was moved to the company town that was, in the same period, losing the company. There is a version of this account in which those two facts are made to rhyme, and I want to be careful not to write it, because they don't. Battle Creek gained production capacity and kept its headquarters. Omaha lost 451 jobs and a building. Those are not equivalent, and the people in Omaha would be entitled to find the comparison irritating. What the two places share is narrower and harder to argue with. Neither of them decided anything. Omaha's plant was closed by a corporate strategy announced in a quarterly earnings release. Battle Creek's company was sold by a shareholder vote in which the city held no meaningful stake. In both cases, the decision was made somewhere else by people who were doing something entirely reasonable from where they sat. That's what a company town actually is, not a place that depends on a company for jobs, which describes most of America. A place where the decisions that determine its future are made by people who don't live there and were never going to. The strike in 2021 was the exception. For 11 weeks, the BCTGM members in 4 cities held a position against a company that had told them it would replace them, and the company backed down. It's the only moment in this entire sequence where the people affected by a decision had any power over it, and they used that power, and they won. The plant closed anyway 4.5 years later, for reasons that had nothing to do with the strike and were never argued in front of the people it affected. The building on F Street is empty now and being prepared for sale. In Battle Creek, the college and the credit union still carry the name.